So let's dive into a fascinating paradox. Imagine this. You're a highly educated parent in China, and you're just done with the intense academic pressure. So you move your family to Singapore, hoping for a happier childhood for your kids. But then something strange happens. You find yourself pushing them even harder than you did back home. So what gives? That's the puzzle we're going to unpack today, all based on a really insightful new study. And this quote from a mom named Audrey, wow, it just gets right to the heart of it. It perfectly captures this emotional trap. She knows she's recreating the very system she tried to run away from. You can just feel the conflict there. This isn't just a simple choice for them. It's a deep emotional struggle these families are living with every single day. So, this is the big question, right? This is what our whole explainer is about. If the entire goal was to get out of that academic pressure cooker, why on earth did they end up building a brand new one, maybe even turning the heat up higher in their new home? Let's break it all down. All right, here's our game plan. We're going to tackle this puzzle in 5 steps. First, we'll look at the why they left China to begin with. Then we'll talk about the shock that hit them when they got to Singapore. After that, we'll explore the new anxieties that started to creep in, how all that anxiety turned into a very specific strategy, and finally, how the global rise of China itself adds this whole other layer of pressure they never expected. Okay, let's jump in. Section 1, the escape from pressure. To really get what's going on, you have to understand that this isn't just any kind of move. The researchers have a specific term for it, and it's called reproduction migration. So what is reproduction migration? It's a key idea here. See, this is different from older waves of migration where people move to, make a fortune. For these professional, middle-class families, the main goal is to reproduce their hard-won social status for their kids. It's all about making sure the next generation doesn't fall behind. And you can totally see why they wanted to leave. They're trying to get away from the Gaokao, which is China's absolutely grueling make-or-break college entrance exam. They want their kids to have a genuinely happier childhood. And of course, there are other worries too, things like air pollution and food safety. Plus, Singapore, with its bilingual education, just seemed like the perfect launchpad for a globally minded kid. But that dream of a less stressful, happier life, well, it collides with reality, and it collides hard. And that brings us to Section 2, this sinking feeling of losing at the starting line. So here's the first huge shock. They get to Singapore and discover it has its own incredibly high-stakes exam, the PSLE, that basically decides a child's entire educational future. But here's the kicker. Instead of happening at age 18 like the Gaokao, this one happens when the kids are just 12. To these parents, it felt like they'd walked right back into the fire, only this time, the pressure starts way, way sooner. And it gets worse. When it's time for that all-important primary school registration, they realize they are systematically at the back of the line. They don't have alumni connections, they don't have older kids already in the schools to give them priority. As immigrants, they're basically left to fight for whatever spots are left over after all the citizens have had their pick. You can just feel the panic in this quote from one mom, Lucy. She says, "Our children have already lost at the starting line." That dream of moving to give their kids an advantage, it suddenly morphed into this nightmare that maybe, just maybe, they'd put their kids at a huge disadvantage. And that feeling, that panic and disadvantage, it basically fires up what the study calls the anxiety engine. They haven't escaped anxiety. They've just swapped it for a brand new model. And when you look at it side by side, it's so clear. Back in China, the system was brutal, yeah, but it was a system they knew. They understood the rules of the game. In Singapore, they're facing this new high-stakes exam, a whole bunch of unfamiliar rules, and this constant nagging fear that their kids could slip through the cracks just because of their immigrant status. Underneath all of this is something really powerful the researchers call status anxiety. See, many of these parents were the first in their families to go to university. They literally studied their way into the middle class. So their single biggest fear, their nightmare scenario, is that their own children won't be able to hold on to that same hard-won status. And this quote from Stella, it just lays it all out on the table. For her and her husband, education isn't just one option among many. It is the only path they know and trust. Why? Because it's the path that worked for them. It's the most secured path. And that belief system turns parenting into this high-stakes mission to make sure their kids follow that exact same blueprint. Okay, so we've got all this anxiety just simmering. How does that actually translate into action? Well, that brings us to the real core concept of this study, this idea of parenting as doing security. So, doing security, what does that actually mean? It sounds a bit academic, but the idea is pretty straightforward. It's that all this super intensive parenting, it's not irrational. It's not just a cultural tick. It's a completely logical, practical strategy to fight back against a feeling of overwhelming uncertainty. All the tutoring, all the planning, it's all work designed to build a firewall against that fear of their family falling down the social ladder. And this mindset creates a very specific playbook of actions. We're talking about parents buying expensive apartments just to live within a certain radius of a top school. They're volunteering hundreds of hours to get priority points for registration. They are pouring unbelievable amounts of money into tutoring for things like the gifted education program, seeing it as a kind of backdoor into an elite school. Some even go so far as to strategically change their citizenship just for the educational edge it might give their kids. Now, you might be wondering, how do they figure all this stuff out? They're in a new country, they don't know the rules. Well, their lifeline is WeChat. These online parent groups become these critical information hubs where they share strategies, tips, everything you need to know to navigate a system you have zero experience with. But here's the thing. These groups are a total double-edged sword. On the one hand, yes, they provide absolutely vital information and emotional support. But on the other hand, they create intense peer pressure and a nonstop culture of comparing your kids to everyone else's. And ironically, they end up amplifying and reproducing that exact same jianhua culture, that's a Chinese term for this kind of hyper-competitive, everyone is stuck in a rat race feeling, that they had tried to escape in the first place. And just when you think the pressure couldn't possibly get any higher, there's one last giant global layer to the story. And that brings us to our final section, the pull of a rising China. This is a huge shift in thinking. As China has become this global economic giant, parents like Amanda have started to see things differently. For them, being fluent in Mandarin isn't just about heritage anymore. No, now it's a vital, competitive tool for the future. Their kids aren't just competing with classmates in Singapore. In their minds, they have to be ready to compete with their peers who are growing up back in China. So, the ultimate goal, the new end game, is to create a global talent. The dream is to raise a child who can get a degree from a top Western university, but who also has absolutely flawless Mandarin and can comfortably navigate both cultures. They're trying to raise a kid who can be a bridge between East and West, perfectly positioned to succeed in this new global reality. And that leaves us with this final, really important question. Look, these parents are doing what they truly believe is necessary to secure their child's future in a world that feels incredibly uncertain. You can't really blame them. But it does make you stop and think. When parenting becomes this kind of intense, individualized, all-out race for one child, what does that mean for the rest of society, for social inequality, and for all the other kids who are running on that very same track?